Oh, you damn right. Recruiting never stops. And this week we get an answer to the question, how many recruits can you put in DKR? It is the recruiting hour once again. I'm Chad Hastings. That is the managing editor of orangebloods.com, Jason Sukamel. If you see him outside the stadium or at the airport this week, there's a reason, because this is probably the biggest recruiting weekend anybody has ever thought up. We have been talking about it for months. Jason, it is finally here. I am so excited for you, for Catch, for the Longhorn fan base of what this thing is about to be. And we're going to start with a bold prediction of yours that is in the 3-2-1 this week. But first, just give me a general comment on, like, I'm a nerd, so I count stuff up. I think I counted 67 guys that you listed in the 3-2-1 that are visiting. Is there any recruiting weekend you can think of that touches what we're about to go through?
So you actually counted them. I have not done that yet. So
you double check me. Count them all out from the beginning where you talk about official visits all the way through the 2027 kids. I counted 67 names.
And I think I've added a couple, and I've taken one off, which remind me, we'll come back to that, taking one off.
Okay.
To answer your question, though, is there a weekend? Not that I can remember. In fact, I can't remember anything close to this. I'm sure there have been other big weekends. Like if I went back to when Notre Dame came to town back in the Charlie Strong years,
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure Mac had some big recruiting weekends. We want to go way back when, but no, I can't remember anything remotely like this in terms of. And those guys I'm listing, I mean, there'll be some other, like, maybe fringe or local prospects that come in. The guys that I'm listing are all guys that have Texas offers. So, I mean, and a lot of them are the elite of the elite national players. I actually spent time last night, Chad, while watching my New York Yankees go to two games to nothing.
Your New York.
Yeah, here goes ZOV. Yeah.
ZOV's right there. Yeah. They are up 2-0 right now.
So while watching that game, I started working on my war room. So I'm running the visitor list again in the war room with some thoughts on certain guys. But I put kind of the rankings. Every guy that was like a 5-star, Rivals 100 or Rivals 250. Dude, it is. I mean, it's not just like, oh, come on in, anybody and everybody. No, it is the who's who of recruiting targets. So it's a big list in terms of quantity, but it's a tremendous list in terms of quality prospects as well. So, but the short answer to your question, no, I can't remember anything like this. I'm sure probably maybe Alabama's had something when Georgia's come to town, or Georgia, Alabama, but not, maybe Michigan, Ohio State. This is a monumental game on the field, and certainly in terms of recruiting impact as well.
Yeah, well, we're going to start with a big name that is certainly one of those high-quality guys. So we've been talking about, I feel like it's sort of a Florida triangle of sorts, at least for me, because I'm intrigued by these guys. I'm intrigued at not only Jvon Hilson, who's who we're going to talk about, number one D end in the country. We've also talked about Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng. Now, one of these guys may be Georgia, to be fair, and maybe it's not all Florida. But then there's Myron Charles. So Myron Charles has now flipped to Texas.
Those guys are all from Florida.
They are all Florida, right?
At IMG Academy.
There you go. Okay, all Florida. So my analogy's playing out at least a little bit. So those, two of those guys are like best at their position in the country. Myron Charles is not quite that, but he was the first guy to look at what was happening at Florida State and say, oh, hell no. And he does that the Michigan game, right? That was
afternoon after the Michigan game. Yep.
Okay, so now let's pick
up. I was on the air with you and Catch. I'm like, gotta go, guys. Remember?
Exactly. So now let's pick up Jvon Hilson, number one D end, also from Florida. You'd been talking about, I think he might come for this Georgia game weekend. Maybe, not sure. But as of today, as of this recording on a Wednesday, I think you're not only sure about that, but you're throwing a prediction out with Hilson. Lay it out for us about Jvon Hilson.
Yeah, Hilson, most people know his backstory. He has a one-time Alabama commitment. He then committed to Florida State. After Nick Saban left, he opened it up, ends up committing to Florida State. He decommitted from Florida State. We're talking about Myron Charles on the day of the Michigan game, the Texas-Michigan game. Well, Jvon Hilson decommitted the next day. So it was a boom, boom, double whammy for Florida State. And immediately all thoughts went to, okay, this looks good for Texas, right? Because Texas and Florida State were kind of the two teams battling it out for his original commitment after the Alabama one I mentioned. So since then, I mean, all signs have pointed towards Texas. I think all signs continue to point towards Texas. He did visit Florida State last weekend, I believe it was. Watched them lose yet again, right? So I just have a hard time envisioning a scenario where he's going to go back to Florida State. I tell you what, UCF, Central Florida, is a team that nobody's taking seriously, and I kind of get it. This is a 5-star player. They don't usually go that route, but he has gone to UCF on an official visit. He was there a few weeks ago for an unofficial visit. He does like that program. So, but I just think when push comes to shove, this one looks too good for Texas. He's actually flying in. He confirmed, a couple of weeks ago that he's coming in. But I talked to Myron Charles, who you mentioned, the Texas defensive line commitment. Now, they're flying in, is what Myron told me, on the same flight. They're literally coming in together. Like, Myron's not coming in with any family members or anything. He's coming in kind of with Jvon Hilson. And he said, and then they're going to meet Josiah Sharma, the defensive lineman commitment out of California, in Austin. So those three are planning on palling around. Myron said, "Hey, I have been working on Jvon Hilson. I text him all the time. I'll just text him the hook him emoji." He said, "I'm going to work on him. I'm going to work on him big time this weekend in Austin." I don't know that he'll come out of this weekend as a Texas commitment. I'm not necessarily predicting that. Wouldn't shock me though, Chad. Hey, if he just gets caught up, it's like, I'm just kind of done with all this. This is where I want to be. Let's quit playing all these games. Could he commit silently? Maybe even publicly? Absolutely. It's possible. I'm not predicting that, but I'm going to be on watch for it. Okay. Now, but I do think this weekend Texas seals him up, be it an announcement this weekend or maybe in December, which is what he's kind of originally planning on. I think Texas does enough this weekend to just kind of reestablish itself, reconfirm what he already knows, and that's where Texas is where he wants to be.
Yeah, it's such a huge opportunity. I do wonder, since it's so unique this weekend, I do wonder about, with that many, like you said, that many quality guys in town, how many of those guys can affect somebody like Hilson, even in just basic conversations of, well, I mean, it's not like you're going to commit this weekend, right? Oh, he wouldn't commit this weekend. Well, I mean, he could. I guess he could. Would you? I mean, all these little conversations that happen. I wonder how it is fired up this weekend. Like, sometimes we talked about, Jason, where it's better maybe for a big name to come in on an official visit alone. It's better to get all that focus on. But this weekend, I would argue it is the energy on the other side that's going to help you out, because the quantity's coming, the quality's coming in, not to mention these two teams playing football. I could totally understand how Hilson or somebody else lets the wave of all of this get to them. If they're even kind of thinking Texas, you got to think maybe turn into mom or dad at some point, Saturday, Sunday, whatever the timing is, to go, you know what? I think this is it. I can totally get it.
Listen, man, there have been guys who get caught up in the emotion and they commit, like, on the field before the game, in the locker room after the game. So it happens. I mean, these are young, impressionable teenagers, right? And I mean, what better atmosphere than the Texas-Georgia game this weekend, assuming it's a good game, but the crowd's going to be involved. In Hilson, I don't want to say I've talked to him a few times, or a couple times, I would say, and he's pretty level-headed when you talk to him, but he's been committed and decommitted from two places. So he's clearly kind of, he makes some kind of emotional decisions, if you will, maybe. So, maybe he's learned his lesson from the two decommitments, saying, hey, I do not want to rush into something. I'm going to take all the time necessary, and I'm not going to make a decision again until I'm 100% ready. Or is he a guy that, like you said, that comes in and he's got people whispering in his ear, and he's got Jonah Williams there on an official visit, and he's got obviously Myron Charles and Josiah Sharma and the coaches, and the fans recognize him. Recruits love that when fans recognize him, and they'll recognize Jvon Hilson. The diehard recruiting fans will. And some guys will even have signs, Jvon Hilson, we want you at Texas. So,
like a Taylor Swift concert.
Yeah, dude. I mean, it's serious. I've seen it all. So, Could it happen? Yeah. I mean, we're talking about, like I said, impressionable teenagers, Chad. So you and I both have impressionable teenagers living in our houses. So we know how quickly they can change their opinion, their feelings on things. So I would say he's on loose commitment watch or soft commitment watch, if you will. Again, I'm not expecting it. You know what I was just about to say? I don't have a pre-commitment story written and ready, but I might by Friday. It's only Wednesday. I probably should as I kind of talk this out loud, and I'm like, oh, I hear myself talk. I'm like, why don't I have a commitment story written for Jvon Hilson? So I'm not predicting he's going to commit this weekend again, but I think it's certainly a possibility. But either way, I think Texas is in a really good spot for whenever he decides.
By the way, Uncle Mickey checking in from north of the border with some hook'em emojis.
Uncle Mickey, where I love Canada, so I'm just curious. Drop it in the chat, dude. Where I used to kind of half jokingly tell my wife, like, I want to move to Canada. My wife and I, not to derail the recruiting discussion, my wife and I have vacationed in Vancouver like 3 times. We honeymooned there. We went to Banff. I've never done Eastern Canada. That's on the list, but boy, I love Western Canada, the Canadian Rockies. One day, Chad, this is a random story. It was 4th of July, and we were having all my friends coming over for a big barbecue. I went to HEB to get some barbecue stuff, and I just had a shirt that I had bought from while we were vacationing in Canada, and it just has a big Canadian flag on it, and it just says Canada. And I wore it to HEB on 4th of July, and like people were giving me dirty looks because I'm wearing a Canadian. Like I think they thought I was doing it to like, F you, America, look, I'm Canadian.
Anti-U.S. stance.
Yeah, so like people were giving me these looks, and I'm like, what is going on? And I got home and I looked down, I was like, oh shit, I just wore a Canadian shirt to HEB on 4th of July. So yeah.
Let me tell you what, Jason Sukumel, there's 364 days where you get to love Canada. There's one day where we don't need that Canada shirt in the Kroger or the Winn-Dixie, please.
Yeah, well, I came home and took it off and put on my Who Loves America This Guy shirt. So I made up for it.
You like tried to counteract the other way.
Yeah.
Uncle Mickey, thank you for the emojis. If you just take the Canadian flag out, that's what Myron Charles has been sending to Jvon Hilson over and over and over again. The recruits are sometimes the best recruits in the end. We've gotten a few chats in, almost 300 folks in the Specs chat. Remember, if you get us a super chat, we appreciate it, and we will get those right to the top of the list. Text guy threw in a nice, obvious statement, and yes, has to be one of the biggest games in DKR history. Yes, text guy, it is. It is only the 3rd time ever that a top 5 matchup will happen in that stadium. 3rd time.
I know you've told of this. The other 2 were Arkansas, right?
Arkansas in 1970 in
what
December.
Was Arkansas ranked?
Arkansas was like 5th.
Okay.
And then the 1-2 matchup with Ohio State in 2006.
Okay.
And that would have been obviously September. This is the first time it's ever happened in October. It is only the 2nd time it's ever happened in conference for Texas. So when you just think through the years, because of the unique quality of OU, and frankly, because the Longhorns and Aggies cannot seem to be good at the same time, it just hasn't been. And frankly, Arkansas too, like all that Texas, Arkansas through whatever run of the Southwest Conference, they just did it one time. So it is unique, text guy. And when you add this recruiting weekend into it, it's just an incredible possibility for Texas.
I truly believe, I said this on the Modcast yesterday, right? I think these are the 2 best teams in the country. I really do. I mean, with all due respect to the other undefeated teams, I know Georgia has a loss, but I think these are the 2 best teams in the country. I won't be shocked to see these 2 teams playing for the national championship. I think they're
I think, Jason, if now that you say that, I think my eyes tell me that too, because I'm thinking if you put Georgia and a list of teams on a neutral field, I think I'd pick Georgia. I'd pick them to beat Ohio State, Oregon, Miami,
Penn State. I mean, yeah.
Penn State, definitely Penn State.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I think we are seeing the best 2 teams in the country this weekend. By the way, just want to give credit to someone from the other side of things. In this case, the other side of the Red River. Takes a big man, Bo. Takes a big man to come into the chat and say, Boomer Sooner, here to eat my crow. And then continues with, good game. Best of luck to you guys the rest of the season. I hope you lose all of your games. That's a fair feeling. You're allowed to have those feelings. There's been a little more in the chat from Bo.
Best of luck. Hope you lose. Well, that's not exactly the
Yeah, so
most
it's a different.
genuine.
Yeah, maybe not genuine. And just so you know, Bo, Sandman has a prediction to send back to you. He's got you going 5-7. He's
Oh, you
got you
better win
going.
this weekend, dude. Or bowl
Yeah,
eligibility might be interesting at the end of the season. Yeah.
it's absolutely true. Man, I can't wait to see two groups of fans that get to welcome, actually three. They're going to go to Oxford. They're going to go to Columbia, whatever that atmosphere is. And they're going to go to Baton Rouge. Like those three fan bases get to welcome a wounded Oklahoma animal to their place. And that's going to be an interesting show to see what it looks like. All right. So we started with Jvon Hilson. Jason, you mentioned a couple of the other guys. So you mentioned a couple official visits that are happening this weekend. One of them is Jonah Williams. Here's the other unique quality to this weekend. I know I've followed you long enough and Orange Bloods long enough, and we've had these discussions long enough that I understand that there are some current commitments that will come in for games. KJ Lacey and names like that, they'll come in, they'll come back. Are they all in town this weekend? Because I saw your list of current commits in the 2025 class, and I'm like, good God, I think they're all going to be in town, and there's like 20 of them.
You know what? That's a good. There's like one or two that I haven't. No, I think John Mills, the offensive lineman from San Francisco, is not going to be able to make it in. He's planning on coming. I think maybe the Kentucky game, but I need to follow up with him. But as of about a week or two ago, he was not going to come in. You know, I'm just going to go down the list. Okay, I mean this will take a minute.
Yeah.
I'll go quickly. Dalen McCutcheon, yes. Myron Charles, yes. Jamie French, yes. Jonah Williams, yes. Official visit. Nick Brooks, yes. Khalik Lockett, yes. Josiah Sharma, yes. Nick Townsend, Jonathan Cunningham, yes. Smith Arogbo is a maybe. He had surgery last week, so it's kind of I need to follow up with him. It was kind of dependent on how his leg was feeling. John Mills,
we'll give him an out. If he doesn't want to come after surgery, we don't understand.
Well, he wants to be there. So John Mills is a no as of my most recent checking. Understandably, he's from San Francisco. Caleb Chester, yes. James Simon, yes. The Coleman triplets, yes. Jackson Christian, Bo Barnes, Ricky Stewart, Lance Jackson, yes. Amari Winston, KJ Lacey. So all but one, let's call it 1.5 as of right now. Yeah.
So that, just that support, I've always thought, I just mentioned it. The commits.
Sorry, Chad, real quick.
Yeah.
There's also 3 commitments in the 2026 class who will all be there as well.
Okay. Because once you commit, and let's just take Myron Charles again, the guy we talking about. He's actively recruiting Hilson. He's into it. He's pumped. He like the hook'em emoji matters a little differently to him right now because he's chosen Texas. He's decided that's where he's going to go, and then it just becomes kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. Then once you're there, and I'm Hilson, or I'm trying to, I'm another guy who's trying to figure, Mbachu, I guess would be another example, right? He's going to take an official, but he's not committed, correct?
He's committed to Florida, actually.
Committed to Florida, right? So he would have to be considering a flip. But then you have all these guys around you, and it's sort of like you'd say to a coach or maybe a parent, "Oh man, I wonder what these guys like about Texas." And it's like, well, there's 18 guys right there. They've all made the same decision. Pick one. Pick a defensive guy because you are. Pick a guy that's from your part of the country. Pick, pick a guy that you vibe with personality-wise. Whatever you want, it's there. Like the full menu of arguments that Sark has to make to these big-time recruits this weekend. It's just wild, and I'm imagining it is unlike, again, anything that would have been available any other weekend.
Well, Sark and most coaches will tell you, I mean, they have to be good recruiters, right? And the university has to sell itself, academics, so on and so forth, winning, of course. But the biggest kind of most influential part of the recruitment is hearing it from current team members. So you're talking about other recruits. Yeah, that helps too, because they're going to tell you, this is why I came here. This is how the coaches have treated me. They treat me like family. But hearing it from actual players in the program that have been there 2-3 years, a David Benda, a Gunnar Helm, even a guy like Colin Simmons is in his first year, but Colin Simmons' voice will carry a lot of weight. We saw it with Ryan Wingo. Ryan Wingo was very active in the summer. Whenever they'd bring guys in for official visits, he would host them on official visits. So hearing it from current team members maybe is as important as hearing it from other recruits. But yeah, they got a lot of different ways they can attack this, right?
Yeah.
They've got a lot of ammunition they can use in support of trying to get these guys to Texas. So again, I don't know that we're going to come out of this weekend saying, okay, Texas picked up 4 commitments. Maybe there's a couple silent commitments, which I'm not the biggest proponent of silent commitments. If you're committed and taking other visits, to me, it's not a true commitment. But I think what we're going to come out, we may have 1 or 2 commitments, but I think what we're going to come out of this weekend more than anything is just like Texas really laid the foundation for future commitments. Guys like Joseph Mbachi, Jvon Hilson, guys in that 2026 class, those elite guys in that 2026 class. I think we're going to look back at this weekend, maybe next summer with that 2026 class when guys are committing in July and August, and we're going to say, okay, things really started trending Texas's way after that Georgia game.
Yeah. And we will get to at least one, if not more, big names in that 26 group. And we'll get to another big name somebody's asking about in the chat. We do have over 400 folks in the Specs chat. Let's give Specs their love. If you need to get stocked up for Texas, Georgia, come on.
Specs same-day delivery can save the day with our Specs app or online shopping. From world-class wines to hard-to-find spirits and craft beers to gourmet foods, delicious snacks, and spectacular sweets. It's Specs. Cheers to savings.
6:30 kick for Texas and Georgia. 2:30 ranked games ahead of that. Bama and Tennessee and Michigan, Illinois, both ranked matchups. So they're kind of the lead-in to Texas and Georgia. You got the Aggies and Mississippi State on the side stage, if you will, at 3:15. There's a lot going on Saturday to follow. If you are a Texas fan, get stocked up at Specs if you need to do that. All right, Jason, somebody had to throw the name in. We were going to get there. Balta wants to know, what about Sanchez? And apparently there's some insider info, and you see if you can verify this. South End Zone Queen says, Sanchez's mom was on Anwar's show yesterday and confirmed they will not be at the game. Jason, I know it was a question in your 3-2-1. Devin Sanchez committed to, let me get this right, Ohio State.
Yep.
Right? Okay, so is this what you're hearing as well?
Yeah, that I kind of mentioned it at the very top of the show. I said, hey, we'll come back to it. But yeah, he is not coming in for the game. I was on with Anwar yesterday, and that was his mom in the chat. Sometimes I'm a little skeptical when someone says, oh, I'm related to so-and-so. I'm like, okay, how do we verify that? But we were able to verify with Devin Sanchez, the Ohio State commitment, North Shore cornerback. He is not coming in to the game this weekend. Now, Riley Pettijohn, who's a linebacker, 5-star linebacker, committed to Ohio State. As of this morning, people close to him are saying maybe. It's still a maybe. But then there's some other verbiage being used that makes me think, okay, it's more probably that he's coming in. But people close to him are downplaying the significance of it. They're like, he's not on flip watch or anything like that. So we'll see. Texas keeps chipping away there. I do think Riley Pettijohn, like Devin Sanchez, is very happy with his Ohio State commitment. I think Texas is going to have to really work to get that one to flip. But yes, I am expecting Riley Pettijohn there. I'd call it like 65-35 maybe. Plans could certainly change between now and Saturday. But yes, Devin Sanchez is out. That's per Devin, per his mom on Anwar's show yesterday. Riley Pettijohn, still a maybe, so called a very soft yes. But I do think Riley winds up showing up with a couple people close to him.
Okay, so let me use Devin Sanchez to kind of tie it to a couple other guys I want to ask about. Devin Sanchez committed to Ohio State. If I'm Ryan Day, I would be very excited to hear your report there, right, that he would not be making that visit. But in another realm, for a rival of Texas, we've talked about Kell Shawn Johnson, the receiver that is committed to A&M. I see him on the list for this weekend. So it's Hitchcock, right, for Kell Shawn? Kell Shawn Johnson, is he still coming in for the visit? What do you make of it that he is indeed coming in if he does?
I need to follow up with Kell Shawn. I'll try to do that today. Kell Shawn's so responsive. I could probably do that right now. But as of last week, I've got a couple other texts that came in and just distracted me. As of last week, yes, Kell Shawn's still planning on coming in. In Texas is also recruiting Malcolm Simpson, his teammate who's committed to Nebraska, a defensive end. They haven't offered him yet, but both those guys are still planning on coming in. Now, this one's a little interesting because Texas last Thursday picked a commitment from Dalen McCutcheon, the receiver who flipped from Florida State out of Lucas Lovejoy. I don't know where that puts Kell Shawn in terms of Texas's numbers. They've got 3 receivers committed. I don't know that they want to take a 4th necessarily. He and Dalen McCutcheon kind of played that same spot, similar profile receivers. They're going to be more slot type guys. So I think Kell Shawn will still come in. It's a great game. He's going to come in with a coach and his teammates. So I think he'll still come in. I don't know that Texas is going to really push right now for him to flip from Texas A&M. They'll welcome him in for the game with open arms. He's a great player. He's a great kid. But I don't know. I mean, his spot, those numbers are starting to get really tight at wide receiver. And with Dalen McCutcheon committing last Thursday, that may have impacted his situation.
All right, let's stay with that position then, because from what you're saying, both guys that are already committed, French and Lockett, will be in this weekend. McCutcheon, who just flipped to Texas, will be in. Where does that leave Michael Terry? Because I saw him on the list as well. Alamo Heights. And what's the update on Terry?
Still 100% a take. Michael Terry's kind of a different animal, certainly than Kell Shawn. He's, those two are 2 different body types, 2 different types of players. Michael Terry, I think Rivals has him maybe as a receiver. I'm not even sure. I should know that, but he's the definition of an athlete. Okay. He can play running back. He can play receiver. He can play some tight end for you. He can play defense. He's throwing touchdown passes at the high school level. So, I mean, he literally does. He's a special teams return guy. He does a little bit of everything. So Michael Terry is a guy that is still 100% a take because he does such a variety of things. Now he is still looking at Nebraska, still looking at Oregon to some extent. I really like Texas's position here. I have for a while, based on some things I'm hearing in the last 2 or 3 weeks. I really like Texas's position, but he may not decide until December. So we still may have, a couple, month and a half or so before he's ready to make an announcement. And I say that, who knows, maybe he's a guy that gets caught up in the excitement of this weekend and just says, I'm ready to put an end to it. But I do think Texas is in a great spot there, and they are still very much pushing for Michael Terry.
All right, Jason, I'm going to throw up a couple chats by one of my new favorite chatters. I don't know if he's right, but he makes me want to play football. It makes me want to put pads on and hit somebody, and I do love this name, David Keith. David Keith Williams. A rotation of Colin Simmons and Jvon Hilson at weak side defensive end would be the best duo at that position in the nation. Jason, when you think of Jvon Hilson and the level we're talking, and again, we said it earlier, right? Number 1 defensive end to many, many folks in this class. So I'm guessing it's not silly to you that somebody would put him in a sentence with Colin Simmons.
It's not silly. He's a 5-star prospect. He's the number 1 player. I think Rivals has Jvon Hilson. I don't have the other rankings, but I think they have him ranked higher than the other services. Is he in Colin Simmons's league? I'm not quite ready to go there. Colin to me is a different animal than just about any player I've covered at that position with his first step, his quickness, his get off, his ability to bend around the edge. So, but yes, Jvon Hilson's a fantastic prospect. I mean, there's a reason Alabama and Florida State and Georgia and Texas and all these schools want him. So, best duo at the position in the nation, yeah, it'd probably be up there, especially if give him a couple years. Can Jvon Hilson do what Colin Simmons has done and come in and be an immediate true impact player? I'm not sure, and it's going to be even harder if you have Colin Simmons right in front of you. Okay, so he may be brought along a little more slowly than Colin has been, but would it be the best duo at that position in the nation? It'd be up there. I can't sit here and say I know what everybody else's edge rushing depth chart looks like, and especially with the transfer portal, that'll change between now and next year. But it would be a hell of a 1-2 punch. I mean, you'd have 2 5-star players, including a guy in Colin Simmons who is kind of a generational talent at that position.
Jason, speaking of duos, how about this idea from David Keith? If Texas could somehow get Riley Pettyjohn from Ohio State to pair with Bo Barnes, they would legitimately have the 2 best linebackers in the 25 recruiting class. That would be an amazing duo for Texas. Ready to go that far on those guys?
Yeah, I would call them. I don't know if they'd be 1 and 2 in terms of the 2 best, but I think it'd be let me word this properly. I don't know if it'd be you have the first best and the second best player in the country at linebacker, but is there going to be a better tandem committed to any school in the country? I don't think so. I think it was On Three, maybe 24/7. I shouldn't promote them, but one of them did elevate Bo Barnes, I think, to 5-star status. Rivals doesn't have him there. That's kind of an outlier ranking. I'll say this, though. I think Rivals has him tremendously underranked. I mean, I think Bo Barnes is a fantastic prospect. This is a guy who's a tremendous athlete. He's got a good nose for the football. He's still only, I believe, in his third year of playing linebacker. So he's 2.5 years in, basically, after playing running back most of his career growing up. So he's a guy that's just scratching the surface of, I think, his potential. I think Bo Barnes is a fantastic player. So is he number 1 or number 2 in the country? I don't know. There's a lot of good linebackers out there, including Riley Pettijohn, including Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng. But I do think Bo Barnes is a fantastic player. I think Rivals needs to move him up the rankings. We'll see if that happens. But it would be a tremendous 1-2 punch at linebacker for Texas. And they got Jonathan Cunningham's another guy who's maybe a little underranked in terms of being a big name, but he's a good athlete who can really run and cover. So if they could get Pettijohn to add into that group, suddenly you're talking about a really solid linebacker class for Texas.
And before we move on, David Keith's got one more. You keep sending them, David Keith. Pairing Colin Simmons and Jvon Hilson at weak side defensive end and Lance Jackson and Colton Vasek at strong side defensive end would give UT the best set of defensive end duos in the This is first world problems right here, David Keith. You're just trying to stack up all that talent. Jason, that would be too bad. That's two badasses on each side coming after opposing quarterbacks.
Yeah, and that would be projecting a couple of years down the road because you still have Ethan Burke still in that equation. You still have other players, So, yeah. But if we're looking like 2 years down the road, yeah, you could make a case that would be a dynamic defensive ends on both sides of the on the line. So that'd be a hell of a haul if Texas can get all those guys.
David Keith, thank you for those chats. Keep them coming. And again, if you want to throw a super chat in, it'll go right to the top of the list. Jason, I'm a sucker for a cool name. So when I saw that there's a guy named Justice coming to town and that he's not just any guy named Justice, he is, let me see if I get this right, the number 1 ranked D tackle in 2026?
No, 2025. Right? 2025.
He is 25. Okay, he's this class. All right, my bad. Yeah. But number 1 rated D tackle. Is that correct?
Yes, number 1 D tackle, number 8 in the country. We reported last week that he's coming in for a visit. Okay, Rivals, we were able to break that. Someone said on Orange Bloods, and I have not confirmed this. I got a couple feelers out that it's now been switched to an official visit. I talked to someone last night. They go, yeah, that's probably true, but I haven't fully confirmed it. And let me tell you why that makes a lot of sense. Okay. He just kind of got on Texas's radar. I won't say got on their radar. I mean, everybody knows who he is, but Texas really started kind of picking up its efforts with him during the off week a couple of weeks ago. And he said, yeah, I'd like to come in. I'll come in and watch that Georgia game. Well, booking flights, booking hotels would cost this dude thousands of dollars. And Justice Terry is a guy who's been known to kind of cancel plans at the last minute. So I think it's smart by Texas to say, hey, let's go ahead and make this an official visit. We'll pay for your flight. We'll get your room. You can bring in your family, bring a couple family members with you. And then he's less likely to kind of peel off at the last minute and change his plan. So everything about it makes perfect sense that it's now going to be an official visit. I just haven't 100% confirmed that directly with Justice or people in his camp yet. But it is a big, he is coming in. We know that in some capacity. I expect he'll be there for the weekend. There's a lot of talk about Georgia. Obviously, he's out of Manchester, Georgia. Even Alabama has been talked about. He was a one-time USC commitment. So that tells you he's not afraid of the idea of going away from home, right? Going from Georgia to Southern Cal. Texas is playing from behind there. I think that's fair to say. I think Georgia's going to be tough to beat. But you know what? Stranger things have happened, man. You get him on campus for an official visit. You show him your depth chart. Look, dude, we got all these guys who we brought in as transfers. Most of them are going to be gone. So it's going to be a pretty wide open depth chart on the interior defensive line. Alex January is a young player getting some experience, but there's not a lot of others. Justice Terry, you could come in and be an impact player as a freshman for us, a true freshman. Look, hey, we just had a great environment. We're going to play in more of these games. maybe we just beat Georgia, so we're trending up. We're the hot team. Come to Texas. So, I think getting him out of the state of Georgia might be tough, but I'm not ruling anything out with this Texas staff.
Yeah, and again, Justice Terry is the name. By the way, a nod to the parents, Justus. Well done. That's country right there. Justice. I love it. And he is going to be coming in. And Jason, you mentioned like a lot of things about this weekend are interesting, and a top 5 matchup would be cool anyway, even if it was not Georgia. But for there to be big star recruits from Georgia come into this game, and they're going to watch this eye test in front of them, there's a little voice in their head that might be telling them, well, Texas isn't better than Georgia, right? Georgia wins national titles. Georgia does this. Georgia does that. I mean, Texas, they're not better than Georgia. But what if they are? What if they show them that they are? It's got to change maybe the way, not that it totally changes the way they think about it, but there's a legitimate sort of a legitimizing quality, I think, to this game. Because we always talk about, Jason, what do these games do to the recruits? How do they react? One of my other favorite parts of the 321 article this week was when you talked about some of these recruits reacting to Texas OU. Mm-hmm. And I know sometimes we've talked about it maybe doesn't matter, but I just feel like more and more as time's going by, everybody's connected, everybody's on a phone, everybody's on social media, all that stuff. I just don't think it's a small thing that these recruits are watching Texas step on OU 34-3.
Yeah, and you remember, going back to the Georgia thing, these recruits that are coming in, the years they've really been paying attention to college football, like their middle school and now high school years, Georgia has been the top dog, right, in college football. I mean, yes, they didn't make the college football playoff last year, but they were close, but back-to-back national championships. So Texas is kind of the new flavor of the month, if you will. Texas maybe could be viewed like Washington last year. Okay, they've been good for a couple years, but are they going to be, be able to do what Georgia's done? Well, if you can beat Georgia this weekend, then you're like, okay, no, maybe they're not the flavor of the month. This is a really good team, on par or better than Georgia, a good program, and they're here to stay. So I think winning this weekend could really, as you said, kind of solidify and just kind of cement some of those impressions in these young men's heads and these young student athletes' heads, saying, okay, hey, this Texas program is legit and they're here to stay. Kind of like the Oklahoma game last weekend. I talked to some recruits who were at that game, and they go to that game as a guest of Oklahoma. And then, as you said, Texas steps on Oklahoma's throats, and the Texas fan base is rowdy, and the Oklahoma invites these players, in like Booby Feaster and Felix Oje, and then it ends up being Ojo, excuse me, OJ. The Oklahoma invites them. It ends up being detrimental to Oklahoma because they're sitting here. These guys are like, "Oh crap, this Texas team's really good." And look what Texas is doing on the offensive line. And look at the Texas offense. Booby Feaster's watching Texas throw the ball around where Oklahoma doesn't have a quarterback. I mean,
yeah, I was going to say, Booby is an offensive player, correct?
Right. Yeah. I'm like, I'm not going to Oklahoma after what I just saw there, unless Booby's still young enough where things could change. I mean. Honestly, if you're even Michael Fasusi, especially, Felix Ojo's 2026 guy, if you're even Michael Fasusi, you're sitting here watching that game thinking, dude, are these coaches going to be there past maybe 1 year of my Oklahoma career? So, that game to me couldn't have gone worse for Oklahoma, being the host team, being a terrible offensive performance, just these programs trending in completely different directions. But it was great for Texas. I mean, you got to, those recruits came in as a guest of Oklahoma, and then most of them walked out of there thinking, damn, Texas looked really good. Texas is higher on my list than they were before I went to that game.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what comes out of this particular weekend. All right, I saw this chat. I couldn't resist because the name does continue to come back around. Just checking. Cladmus 782. Just checking. Is DeCorian Moore still a take with the current wide receiver class?
He's still a take. DeCorian Moore could call on National Signing Day, and you're going to take DeCorian Moore. But I don't know. I haven't really even checked that closely because he's so locked into Oregon, I feel like. And I feel like Texas is really happy with its wide receiver haul. I don't think Texas is actively pushing and pursuing there. And I say that Could Decory Moore show up at the game on Saturday just to watch a great game? Sure, but I'm not expecting it. To answer the question, is he still a take? Yeah, he's always a take, but it's not a storyline that I'm tracking here and thinking there's anything that's going to happen there.
Okay, there you go. Just had to try. And then Tanner with a comment on this weekend. That big house is going to be electric. We are slowly becoming a stadium people want to come to. We have really turned it around for the atmosphere. That's the other part of it, Jason. Like everything that CDC and that crew have done to set up an environment, it was designed. Not specific. Maybe they weren't specifically thinking of this week, but this is when it can be fully realized. Night kick, the smoke. You start with game day early. You're ending with a drone show and the smoke show and the light show, and you hope a good football show. If it all comes together, it is a presentation that I would argue nobody else can pull off.
Yeah, it's going to be an awesome presentation. But I do have a challenge almost for Texas fans. This is going to be interesting. I talked to Felix Ojo. I've talked to a couple other guys who were at that Texas A&M game. Or Texas A&M Notre Dame game. And then Felix Ojo was at the Texas OU game. And I've talked to people who've been at other Texas games who were at the Texas A&M Notre Dame game. Every one of them, to a man, has said, yeah, that atmosphere up in Dallas was awesome last weekend. That atmosphere at the Texas home game, was against Mississippi State was great, but it wasn't nearly as loud as Texas A&M Notre Dame. So I said, I'm curious. I told Felix, I said, I'm going to talk to you after the Texas Georgia game. And I said, I'll be curious to hear then if he says, oh yeah, that was every bit as loud as Texas A&M Notre Dame, or if he still says, yeah, Texas A&M Notre Dame was still louder. So, you can understand it at a neutral site game where the crowd's 50-50. It's not going to be quite as loud. You don't have 100,000 people screaming for one team. You can understand it against Mississippi State or, UTSA. The crowd's not going to be as hyped. But Texas fans, there's no reason that stadium shouldn't be as loud as Kyle Field or louder this weekend. So I'll be curious to see what some of these guys have to say after that game on Saturday. Now, that's going to be an electric environment. You said the drone show and everything else, and they'll have some cool things. And Del Conte, those guys will probably have a trick or two up their sleeve. But I'm curious to hear what these recruits say. Guys who are at Texas A&M Notre Dame, who are at Texas and Georgia, I'm curious to hear what they say, kind of comparing those atmospheres.
It will be an interesting comp. We did get a super chat in from Grayson. Thank you, Grayson. Because every $2 helps. $2. Is Quinn still a first-round pick? Boy, he could certainly help make that argument this weekend, couldn't he?
Yeah, I think he is, based on the projections we've seen. But he wasn't great last week, and there's still a lot of football left to be played. I mean, he needs to stay healthy for the remainder of the season. But yeah, you're right, Chad. If he comes out and has a big game this week and outperforms Carson Beck, that would go a long way towards helping his draft status.
Yeah, that would definitely be big. All right, Jason, in terms of this weekend and the recruiting angle, we've hit a lot of different names. There is no way we can go through every name you put in the 3-2-1. It'll take too damn long. But anybody we haven't mentioned maybe that you feel like we need to mention here in the show?
There's so many. Where do we start? We haven't mentioned Kevin Wynn, another Florida State defensive line commitment. He's still committed to Florida State. He's saying the right things, but if everything going on at Florida State, I don't know that he'll wind up there. Some of the same schools, Georgia and some other schools are still coming at Kevin Wynn. He's supposed to be in Austin this weekend for an unofficial visit. That 2026 list, it's so deep. Jalen Lott. Let me pull up, in fact, give me 1 sec here, Chad. I'm going to pull up my War Room write-up. So 2026, KJ Edwards, Rivals 100. Javion Osborne, Rivals 250. Jalen Lott, Rivals 100. Caden Finley, Rivals 100. John Turntine, 5-star. It just goes on and on and on. Tyler Atkinson, a linebacker out of Loganville, Georgia, Grayson High School, 5-star. Tank King, Rivals 100 member. It just goes on and on and on. There's so many. I said it earlier in the show. Not only are there a large number of players, it is just an elite list of players. 2027, Booby Feaster, Brian Swanson, Rivals 100. Braylon Williams, Rivals 100, probably a 5-star. Brady Edmonds, a quarterback out of California. He'll be a 5-star when they start handing out 5-stars. So I mean, this is unlike anything I've ever seen. So we could keep going down the list, but it would probably eat up too much time. Yeah, it's a heck of a list.
Well, go back to one name you mentioned, because Ketch and I earlier this week on the 12 o'clock show talked about Tyler Atkinson is his name, right? And correct me if I'm wrong. So he's a 2026 guy, and he's an outside linebacker.
Yeah.
So would it be fair to compare him to Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng in terms of the number one guy at that position in these classes? Like Owusu-Boateng is in 25, he's 26. Do I have that correct?
Yeah, I think Tyler Atkinson's probably the better player, if I'm being honest. He's ranked higher, and if you look at across the industry, he's ranked higher pretty much unanimously. And he is a teammate of Nick Brooks, the Texas commitment. He's a teammate of he's a teammate of Joseph Mbachu, a guy that they're trying to bring in. So they're trying to develop a little pipeline there, if you will. So, they actually have some ammunition in their pocket that they can use to help recruit him. So tremendous player. Like, if I look, he is number 8 in the country, Chad. I mean, he's a 5-star right now, number 8 in the country. There are some commitment projections to Georgia, but that's what people thought about Nick Brooks too. So, you get him in there with Nick Brooks, with Joseph Mbachu. Maybe you can talk all three of those guys into wanting to play together.
Yeah, really interesting. Yeah, just some of the biggest names in the country, to continue to reiterate that at all positions, biggest names in the country. This is where, to me, Jason, it starts to have the feel of, again, if I were a Texas fan, this is what I want to feel like as a fan. I want to feel like my program is like Georgia, like Ohio State, like Alabama, where you'll read like big national stories, where on the crawl of a game, it's such a big deal that a kid picks a certain school. Texas has already had a couple of those recently. The names are so big. If Hilson, let's just say Hilson did get caught up in everything and officially flipped, or whatever you want to call it, to Texas this weekend, that's going at the bottom of the screen, Jason. At the end of college football, it's going to go on the bottom of the screen for NFL Sunday. That's how big a deal it is. If I'm a Texas fan, that's what I love, maybe more than anything else, is that the best of the best they're not always going to go. They're not always going to commit, but they are now seeing Texas like they're seeing some of these others.
Yeah, I've always said, in Alabama, when Nick Saban was there, it's kind of the same. Honestly, they're still doing a good job. But you mentioned Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State. Those three programs recruit at a different level and have been for about a decade than everybody else. And that's why every single year they're in the national title conversation. You'll have a Washington pop up every now and then. Notre Dame will have a good year. Obviously, Texas, Oklahoma. But those three teams, if you want to be consistently in the championship mix every single year, you have to not just have like a 5-star here or there, or a bunch of Rivals 100 members. You got to have the elite of the elite. A guy like Tyler Atkinson, who, those dudes are the true cream of the crop. Those are the guys that you build your foundation. I get it, the portal, you can help here and there, but no, if you want championship level programming year in and year out, it comes with recruiting high school players and the truly elite players. Texas is in that conversation now. Now they're going to have to close on some of these guys, but they're at least putting themselves in that conversation with the Ohio States, the Georgias, the Alabamas. And I think it's only going to continue with the way this program is trending. I think we're going to see more and more of that. And it's a good place to be for Texas, and a good place to be for Longhorn fans.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, one super chat before we wrap up. Barbs10, good to meet you the other day, Barbs10. On DK, the optics of grandma in the wheelchair and rolling 15 deep, and you're picking Oregon. You're just grabbing extra candy from the Take One Bowl on my front porch, hating the player and the game.
I'm a Take One Bowl person myself, Barbs. I get that analogy. Yeah, everybody thought, when she's talking about Decory Moore, of course, when he came in for that visit and that picture kind of went viral with Sark greeting grandma in the wheelchair, everybody's like, okay, that looks great for Texas, but you can just never discount Oregon. Listen, I actually like Decory Moore. I've talked to him on a few occasions. He's a really good kid, I think, a good young man. And I don't hate on a kid going to Oregon. Dude, Oregon's beautiful. That's a great program. They got it rolling there. They run a good offense. I mean, could he have stayed home and gone to Texas and you've been an in-state hero? Of course. But, I mean, it's not like he made a bad decision going to Oregon. They got deep NIL pockets. I mean, everything about it kind of makes sense. And I mean, Texas is doing fine. Texas is going to be fine. I hope DeCorey Moore goes up there and has great success. And who knows, maybe Texas and DeCorey Moore will square off one day on the field, and one side will get the better of the other. But I wish him nothing but the best, and I think it was probably a good decision for him.
Barb's 10, thank you for that super chat. Before we get out of here, we want to remind you that Jason's 321 article, it's there for you. Incredible list of the guys that are coming in this weekend, and it may tweak up a little bit. Don't forget the War Room coming up Thursday night as we're recording here on a Wednesday. But check out the 321 article. It is brought to you by the good folks at TCH Social, and that's where we're gonna be again this week for the watch party. They enjoyed it so much last week, they said, y'all come back out here, make your plans to get out there. If you haven't seen the largest TV in North Austin, I am about to show it to you. Look at this monster. Look at what you're seeing here. This is a 16 by 1 in the middle, surrounded by 4 4x1s. That's what Jeff Ketchum and I were watching late Saturday night after we got done with the post-game show, and we dialed it all up. It is unbelievable. TCH Social Austin, 183 in Anderson Mill area. If you remember the old location of Texas Card House, it is just a little bit north of that location. Same side of 183, just a little bit north of where they were. Put in your GPS. It'll get you there. Just incredible stuff at TCH Social. The food was great, so we want to give them their love. But if you're looking for a place to come watch the game, that is definitely your place to do that. Also, we want to mention, excuse me, as many times this week as we can, there is a free trial offer. You want to go see that list of recruits we're talking about that Jason has for you in the 321? You can go check it out for free. And how about the rest of the season for free on this free trial offer? The promo code is TEXUGA. You can also just scan that QR code. Thanks to our graphics department for getting that all put together. Big weekend coming up. All right.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting out there for that TCH Social. I'll be down on campus this week, so I won't be able to do it. And then I'll be gone next week for the Vanderbilt game. But yeah, I'm looking forward to coming out there and seeing that and hanging out with you and eat some good food, watch some good football, and do some work while there.
Good stuff. Those specials are going to start 5:30 for a 6:30 kick. $1 draft beer, $2 draft jellyfish. I can't say it enough. $2 draft jellyfish. And you can get a $1 Stella on draft beer, people. Are you kidding me? I had a $1.
Where do you get that anymore, right? Yeah.
Stella. I forgot how good Stella was on draft, Jason. Good God, that's a great beer coming out of the draft, man. You guys got to check that out. All right, so come see us for Texas and Georgia. Thank you for liking, subscribing, getting your notifications. The House Divided is coming up at noon today. Football with Friends at 6. And the Outsiders tonight, the predictions on the game, picking other games. Guess who's joining the Outsiders tonight? Reese Davis of College Game Day. He might have something to say about Chance Mock. Chance Mock might have something to say back. We'll see what that conversation is like. He was very classy about the whole thing, and that's why we wanted to have him on. One of the best minds of college football out there, and, of course, the host of the biggest show. They're coming to town. We'll get his thoughts on that. He is an Alabama guy deep down, if you didn't know that.
I did not know that. Is that right?
Yeah. He's so good at being fair. Yeah. Not a lot of people know. In fact, I thought he was a Georgia guy a couple weeks ago. I double-checked. I'm like, oh, no, it's Bama. I knew he was one of the big dogs, but I couldn't remember which one. So we'll talk to him about all kinds of stuff tonight. 8:30 is The Outsiders if you want to check it out. Everybody have a great rest of your Wednesday. Thank you to over 650 of you sitting in that Specs chat right now. And thanks to so many of you that are going to check this show out later. We appreciate all the support. Until next week, 10 a.m. on a Wednesday, this is the Recruiting